At the movie's start, a man wakes up in the middle of the night to a loud noise. When he goes outside to check who's there, he encounters and is swiftly eliminated by the main antagonist, the boogeyman. In the next scene, we get a glimpse of the life of Sam, a married woman. Her husband, Eric, is a workaholic who's barely around, and she expresses this concern to him. Eric explains that he's trying to get a promotion, and if he's successful in doing so, he'll take the family to a beach vacation. Before leaving, their son Jamie hands Eric a drawing he made of his father. However, the drawing also contains the image of a bogeyman. When Eric asks Jamie how he learned of such an entity, the kid reminds him that he was the one who mentioned the boogeyman. In the next scene, it's revealed that the husband isn't headed to work. He instead picks up his mistress Naomi, and they head to a cabin in the woods. Once there, Naomi complains about how shabby the place is. But Eric insists it's the only safe and hidden place he can find. While waiting for Naomi to change outfits, Eric sees that his son's drawing is in his pocket. He notices that it also has a cabin in the background, similar to what he's staying in right then. However, he throws the drawing away as soon as Naomi comes out wearing nothing but a nurse-themed two-piece. They fornicate until the evening. At night, Naomi starts talking about how the place reminds her of a creepy dream she once had. Eric offers her a beer, but she insists she wants something stronger. He then shows her a vial of white powder, implying they'll be doing a different type of questionable activity next. Naomi heads down first to grab something. While pouring herself a glass of wine, Naomi senses the presence of someone lingering around her. It's the boogeyman, ready to take another victim. She hears a knock on the door, and she thinks Eric's friends have arrived. When she steps outside, the atmosphere starts glowing green, and Naomi is put into a trance. She mindlessly walks into the forest, unable to control herself. When she snaps out of it, she's confused as to how she got there. Suddenly, the boogeyman appears behind her. Naomi falls to the ground, exposed. With one swift stomp, her head is crushed, and blood splatters all over the ground. Meanwhile, Eric is still upstairs, oblivious to what happened. Before the scene cuts off, the boogeyman slowly opens the door to Eric's room. The next morning, a group of individuals arrives at the cabin. Calvin, who just got out of rehab, doesn't like the place they'll be staying for a couple of days. Tim, on the other hand, is excited to cook the food he brought. Jax complains about Eric not greeting them as they arrive. Upon entering the place, Clavin spots the wine glass still filled. Suddenly, he gets the urge to drink it, but before he can, he hears a scream from upstairs. Turns out, it was just Jax, who was surprised to see Eric, all exposed in his bed. The group later gets into an argument about how they should be mindful of having alcohol around because they're trying to help Calvin stay sober. Eric shows them some attitude. He could barely care. The group then gets into a messy argument, which leads to Eric leaving. The planned weekend staycation isn't going as expected. Stressed out, Calvin decides to go on a walk around the house. For some reason, he grabs a trash bag and drinks from the cans he finds there. He's probably relapsing because of the heated discussion earlier. All the while, the boogeyman is somewhere nearby, patiently observing. Calvin stumbles upon a window and decides to take a peek at Jax, who's undressing. He almost gets caught when Jax notices the boogeyman's movement outside. Tim also spots Calvin, but he just makes up an excuse, saying he was taking care of a raccoon problem. Later that night, Calvin gets bored with playing poker with his friends. He says the feeling is not the same when he's not intoxicated. He excuses himself, goes upstairs, and rummages through Naomi's belongings until he finds a pack of cigarettes. When Calvin gets back to his friends, he lies about searching for a stimulant, stating that he went to use the bathroom instead. He then shifts the topic and talks about how people have been disappearing in the woods they are in. He likens it to the Bermuda Triangle, but except for the sea, it's a forest. Tim also mentions the legend about the Ridgefield boogeyman, who stalks people in the woods and ends them. Jax is disturbed by the conversation, so to make her feel better, Tim flirts with her, and they publicly display affection in front of their friend. Of course, Calvin feels awkward and doesn't know how to feel. Later that night, things become more awkward for Calvin as he finds himself listening to the couple's grunts and moans in the other room. The walls can barely contain the noise they are making. Unable to sleep, Calvin decides to search the house again for any substance he can find. He stumbles upon Jamie's crumpled drawing and a marker. He tries sniffing the marker, but since it's non-toxic, he's not getting the hit he needs. Desperate, Calvin even reads the ingredients of the mouthwash in the bathroom, along with some random pills, calculating if he'll be able to get intoxicated by them. Meanwhile, Eric's car breaks down in the middle of the night in some random area. Naturally, he's annoyed by this. Now, back to the cabin, the couple is still going at it, and Calvin is in his room, talking to himself, debating if he should chug the mouthwash and pop some pills. Unfortunately, his addiction takes over him, so he relapses. While Eric is trying to figure out how to get his car running, a green glow flashes once again, and he gets hypnotized into walking into a glowing area. When he finally snaps out of the trance, the boogeyman quickly snatches him away and rips off his arm. The monster also consumes his flesh. At the cabin, Calvin experiences the side effects of chugging mouthwash. He starts throwing up, and his stomach burns. This leads him to interrupt his friend's lovemaking session to tell them he is in pain. However, instead of being concerned, they're just mad they got interrupted. Later, after Calvin is feeling a little better, he has a long conversation with Tim. They reminisce and talk about their current lives. To sum it all up, Calvin is unhappy with his life and is not sure when he'll be able to turn it around. Tim provides him some encouragement without trying to sugarcoat his statements. Then, Tim goes back inside to continue the act that was interrupted earlier. The next morning, Jax confronts Calvin after discovering that her mouthwash is empty. Instead of owning up to his relapse, Calvin plays the victim card, telling them that they are being accusatory just because he has a history of using substances. They give him a chance to come clean, but instead, he just crashes out, opting to walk out on the conversation. While mumbling to himself and walking in the forest, Calvin encounters a group of hipsters. He talks to the couple John and China, who have been camping for a while and taking mushrooms. Calvin brings up the strange noises in the forest. He thinks it sounds like people being murdered. However, the couple reassures him that it's just noises made by coyotes. The couple correctly guessed that Calvin had been having withdrawal symptoms. They offer him a smoke, and once again Calvin gives in, relapsing again. Later, Calvin takes a peek at Jax again while she's sunbathing. However, this time, he spots a shady figure watching the woman as well. He gets out of his hiding spot and dashes towards the location where he saw the figure. Unfortunately, he doesn't find anyone in the woods. Tim spots Calvin and tells him he's worried about him since he's been gone for a while. Calvin doesn't explain what he's doing there. Instead, he lies again, saying he was just out enjoying nature. Later, the trio enjoys a game of bocce, where the goal is to get your ball closer to a smaller target ball. Calvin goes first, and he rolls close to the target. Jax's attempt doesn't beat Calvin's, but Tim's does. While Calvin is annoyed that he lost, the fact that his friends can't stop being affectionate in front of him adds insult to injury. That night at dinner, while sulking, Tim hands him a plate of what seems like raw meat. The couple eats in front of him and acts like they are mocking him. They seem to be enjoying the raw meat as well. At this point, it's unclear if this is just a substance-induced hallucination. In the next scene, Calvin is having a smoke with China, John, as well as his other friends. Eric's presence in this scene suggests that this might be a dream. The boogeyman appears and murders everyone, tearing them limb from limb while Calvin watches. To make it more disturbing, the couple is also fornicating while this is happening. Finally, Calvin wakes up in cold sweat, unable to grasp the disturbing nature of the nightmare. However, even after waking up, Calvin has to deal with equally disturbing noises coming from upstairs. Tim and Jax are at it again. This causes Calvin to spiral again. This time, he takes out a gallon of degreaser and a gallon of drain cleaner. One sniff of the drain cleaner and he's already vomiting. However, he doesn't stop there. Calvin actually takes a sip of the degreaser and chases it down with alcohol. What Calvin is doing to himself might be scarier than the boogeyman. Even when he's dangerously intoxicated, or rather poisoned, he can still hear the noises coming from inside the couple's room. Then, while wandering in the forest, he sends his grandmother a voicemail that starts with angry accusations. But by the end, he still tells her he loves her. Calvin then sends a voicemail to his ex. This one starts on an apologetic tone, as if he's guilty about taking her for granted. But then by the end of it, he's hurling insults and being toxic. Finally, he calls Eric and sends him a voicemail, telling him to come back. While doing so, he sees Eric's abandoned car. Calvin grabs a flashlight and starts searching nearby for Eric. He follows a trail of dismembered limbs until he sees Eric's body, and the boogeyman is also there, munching on the remains. The sheer horror of the sight sends Calvin running back to the cabin. Interestingly enough, the boogeyman does not chase him. Back at the cabin, Calvin barges into the room where the couple is getting busy. He frantically tells them they need to get out because he saw the boogeyman and Eric's deceased body. Of course, the couple doesn't think he's telling the truth. They think he is just under the influence of whatever he took. This time, Calvin admits to taking substances he found under the sink, but he is still insistent that they should leave the place as soon as possible. Again, Jax is not convinced that Calvin is in the right state of mind. Tim, on the other hand, gives the junkie the benefit of the doubt, so he joins him back at the place where Calvin saw the body. Once there, Eric's body is already gone. However, they hear a noise which in time becomes curious, wanting to check it out. Despite Calvin repeatedly telling him not to go further, the green light has already hijacked Tim's body. Instead of saving Tim, Calvin is just frozen, unable to decide whether to run away or save his friend. As a result of this inaction, the next time Tim shows up, there's already a hole in his abdomen. And so, another victim is claimed by the boogeyman. Not knowing what else to do, Calvin just runs away. Calvin arrives back at the cabin where Jax is anxiously waiting. He tells her what happened to Tim and hands her a frying pan while putting a bowl on his head. Apparently, this is supposed to prevent the boogeyman from reading their thoughts. Not long after, they try to leave, but the boogeyman is already at the door, ready to get them. The duo runs upstairs and hides behind the bed, essentially trapping themselves with the monster nearby. During the brief moment they are together, Clavin drops an entire lore about how the boogeyman might be a super soldier born out of experimentation. Then, in the same conversation, he confesses his love for Jax. Jax hears Tim's voice from downstairs, and she immediately gets out of her hiding spot to check if her boyfriend is really back. At the same time, she doesn't want to listen to Calvin's nonsense anymore. After she leaves, Calvin discovers the bottle of white powder that Eric brought. Of course, he immediately sniffs it while revealing why he went to rehab. Apparently, when in his most intoxicated state, Calvin is capable of extreme violence. Hence, he plans to use the substances as fuel to fight the boogeyman. Armed with nothing but a frying pan, Calvin follows Jax's voice and spots someone hiding in the shower. Without confirming who it is, he unleashes several strikes, hitting whoever the person inside is. Unfortunately, when he pushes aside the shower curtains, he sees Jax, lifeless, with a face so deformed that she is almost unrecognizable. Shortly after, Calvin finds himself in front of a mirror. This is when something unexpected happens. The boogeyman starts talking to him, revealing that he's been helping him with the murders. However, Calvin denies this. He refuses to believe that he had any part in aiding the boogeyman. However, after repeatedly talking to himself in the mirror, something clicks inside Calvin's head. He plops down on the floor, laughing manically, as if realizing his true identity. The next day, other guests arrive at the cabin. They're there for a Friendsgiving celebration. One of them prepares the food and drinks. While doing so, the boogeyman appears and stabs him, ripping off his spine in the process. The other guest is upstairs, unaware of what's happening. The final shot shows Calvin under the bed wearing the same outfit as the boogeyman, with a knife in hand, ready to murder. In the end, it's not so clear whether Calvin is the boogeyman or his partner in crime. I guess we'll never know.